Okay.
Where did my bag go?
Well, the whole world is on this committee. I don't know if they're here to watch me
Where
or
did my bag go?
make sure I don't make any mistakes. Okay, so again, another milestone like we had at the last committee meeting. This is the first MTA Bus Operations Committee meeting. I sat on the I'd sat on the Long Island Bus Committee for 9 years, and I always felt that it was a very disrespected company, the MTA bus. But so let's hope that now that it's joined together and we're very forceful and we have this big fabulous committee, and I think it's, in terms of operating budget, it's nearly as big as transit?
Yes.
Nearly as big as transit, so I think now it's time we get some respect here.
And we have Joe.
And we have Joe, absolutely.
What more could you
I
want?
wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah.
And I definitely wouldn't mess with me, so it's cool. All right, so we have to first do approve the minutes and the work plan of of 3 different.
Right. Of the MTA bus.
Okay, so.
You want to do speakers first?
Oh, are there any public speakers?
No, they're not.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'm not supposed to say that. Okay, so we're going to take them all together, approve the minutes of the Long Island Bus.
Long Island, MTA bus, Long Island bus, and New York City Transit.
May I have a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Now that the operations performance summary comes next,
Okay.
and Joe will talk about that.
Work plan. We need to approve the work plan.
I thought I said work plan also.
And we did minutes,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Oh, I thought I said minutes of work plan. Okay, so also may I move the work plan from those? Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so we're all approved. Now let's
Okay.
get down to it.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson Chevelle and members of the committee. Welcome to our first MTA Bus Operations Committee meeting. I want to mention there's 2 buses outside. One is the 3-door Volvo articulated bus. This is going to be the bus that you're going to see in all the SBS bus operations. The buses are being made, assembled upstate New York in Plattsburgh, New York. They're going into service on Fordham Road in the Bronx on the SBS portion of the BX12 up there. And they're also going to go in service when we're ready to roll out the M15, the SBS portion of the M15. Excuse me. It's our first 3-door bus in the history of New York City. We've had a lot of input on its manufacture. So I would invite you all to go take a look at that. And also at the front there, to show you how far we've come, in front of that bus is Bus 3100, which is an old Fifth Avenue coach, a bus that we do use around the holidays, in the summer, special events. We do put these buses in regular revenue service, and our customers love it.
More people were looking at that one than the new one.
I'm sure, yeah. I'd like to now give the floor to Vice President Chief Transportation Officer and Labor Relations Officer John Hine for his operations report.
Good morning. For the operations performance section, data for each indicator will now reflect performance at both the individual agency level as well as the combined performance of all 3 bus units. I'll now present some performance highlights for the month of February. Overall combined bus MDBF was up 9% in February of 10 over February 09 levels. Long Island Bus more than doubled their MDBF performance from February 09. This was due to their new bus deliveries and best practices in maintenance applied through the consolidation of bus operations, including the implementation of the SPEAR maintenance management system, which will now be used at all MTA Bus, Long Island Bus, and DOB New York City Transit bus depots. The combined 12-month average MDBF through February 10 was down slightly by 1.4% compared to the 12-month average. Overall, February bus service performance was relatively strong despite the snow we experienced in February. Combined AM weekday pullouts were 98.37%, and combined PM weekday pullouts were 98.96% for the month of February. Combined AM weekday pullouts were 99.53, and combined PM weekday pullouts were 99.72 for the previous 12 months. Combined completed trips were 98.34% for the month of February and 99% for the previous 12 months. Steve Vidal will now talk about the safety.
With regard to safety performance, overall, the 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled improved by 5.7% from last year across the 3 bus units. Similarly, the 12-month rate for bus collision injuries per million miles also improved by 4.9%. The 12-month rate for customer accidents, however, rose 7.3% over the prior 12-month period, and the rate for customer accident injuries also increased by 4.4% over that period. The 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents worsened by 25.2% from our 2009 levels. We are instituting restricted duty work options for injured employees at MTA Bus, similar to the successful practices already in place in DOB to improve performance in this area. Tom Charles will now report on paratransit. I'm sorry.
So there's lots of positive things that we're hearing about in terms of our safety, in terms of our mean distance between failures, things like that. But this is like non-negotiable in terms of a 25% increase in employee accidents. I'm sure a portion, without question, are legitimate, but definitely a portion of them are illegitimate. And it could be a sign of the times. It could be a sign of us not having the proper programs in place. But I just left the Metro North Long Island Railroad meeting, and they're doing stellar performance in that area. So there's no way that they're going to show us up. So I don't know what is going to be required here. I know it's tough, and the employee accident, not the employee accidents, the passenger, the customer accidents, those being up as well. I know it's a pattern, and it usually goes along with when the economy isn't doing well. So it's a big challenge. But next meeting, can we have some sort of, I know we're not going to have it resolved, obviously, by next meeting, but can you make some sort of presentation on what you've come up with in the last month? I mean, in this next month, and what you've come up with in terms of addressing it?
Yeah, definitely. At the next meeting, we'll present those programs that have been put in place over the last several months. Unfortunately, when you look at a 12-month roll, you don't get to show it. So I would say you'd see better trends, and you'll see the programs when we'll bring it to the next meeting.
Thanks.
Good morning. I'd like to report on the paratransit. Point out that we have expanded the number of performance indicators presented for the Long Island Bus Able Ride service to better match the amount of data already provided with the New York City Transit Access-A-Ride service. Both Access-A-Ride and Able Ride paratransit ridership showed a decrease in ridership for the month of February due to the heavy snowstorms. Access-A-Ride was down 1.8% and Able Ride was down 15.5% as compared to February 2009 levels. The snowstorms had a longer-lasting impact on paratransit riders as fewer trips are requested in advance of a forecasted storm. However, for the most recent 12-month period, paratransit ridership continues to increase relative to the prior 12-month period. Access-A-Ride was up 15.7% and Able Ride was up 2.9%. When compared to 2010 adopted budget levels, Access-A-Ride ridership was lower than budget by 6.7%, and Able Ride ridership was lower than budget by 3.4% for the year-to-date through February. Paratransit fare box revenue for Access-A-Ride was worse than the adopted budget by 12.9% for the month of February. It is 6.9% lower than budget for the year-to-date. Able Ride fare box revenue was 10.2% worse than adopted budget for the month of February. It is virtually equal to budgeted levels for the year-to-date through February. Monthly requests for service in February increased by 7.3% for Access-A-Ride, but decreased for 2.4% for Able Ride. For the 12-month average, requests for service increased 16.5% for Access-A-Ride and 4.7% for Able Ride. Trips completed were down 1.1% for Access-a-Ride and down 15.1% for Able-Ride in February compared to last year. For the last 12 months, completed trips were up 15.2% for Access-a-Ride and up 3.9% for Able-Ride when compared to the prior 12-month period. The favorable trend regarding passenger no-shows as a percentage of scheduled trips continued for Access-a-Ride in February, as there were 20.2% fewer no-shows compared to last year. However, Able-Ride passenger no-shows increased 3.5 in February 2010 over February 29. At this time, I want to report on one of the initiatives to reduce the costs of paratransit service, our continual effort to increase the use of car service and taxis. At the end of 2009, paratransit authorized the use of car service and taxis for 12.5% of scheduled trips. The previous 3-year annual average increase in car service taxi authorizations is approximately 1.8%. Our goal for 2010 is, at a minimum, double this annual increase and achieve 16% or more for 2010. To accomplish this, we have 3 actions underway. The solicitation for additional car service contracts, not only to replace 7 contracts that terminate this year, but also to increase the overall number of car service contracts beyond the 14 we currently use. A recent estimate of the solicitation process seeks to submit the additional awards to the July board for approval. The second is a test and evaluation of the use of a prepaid debit credit card for Access-a-Ride customers to pay for yellow taxi service. At present, the sponsor bank and New York City Transit are reviewing the terms of the agreement for the test pilot program. In addition, in a meeting last week with the new taxi and limousine, Commissioner David Yaski produced a possible solution to a more timely exchange of trip data from yellow taxis. We anticipate a confirmation of this solution by this week. The launch of the prepaid card system is projected to occur in June. And lastly, instead of awarding contracts to individual car services, Paratransit will test and evaluate the possibility of using a broker with access to multiple car service bases and dispatch and software technology developed for car service operations. The software technology includes the administration of patron information, facilitates dispatch, and allows for secure debit credit card transactions, inclusive of a member card system. Under this model, Paratransit will release a manifest of trips to the car service broker each day. The broker will in turn dispatch and perform all trips as per the manifest. The launch of the pilot program is also projected for June. And now I'll turn it over to Tom Del Silva.
Good morning. Combined fixed-route bus ridership levels continue to trend downward because, in part, of the June fare increase and in part because of the overall economic downturn. Total fixed-route ridership decreased by 10% for the month of February in comparison to February 2009. The multiple snowstorms during February contributed to this decrease. If you exclude the 2 heaviest days of snow when schools were closed, ridership was virtually on budget for the month. For the 12-month period, total ridership was down 3.3 as compared to the previous 12 months. Year-to-date, MTA bus ridership is 2% below adopted budget levels. Long Island bus is 1.6 below adopted budget levels. And the Department of Buses and Transit is 4.3 lower than budget. Combined average weekday ridership was down 9.6 for February and down 3.5 for the 12-month period. Weekend ridership was down 8.3 for the month of February and 3.1% for the 12-month period. On to the finance report. Preliminary financial results show that fixed route fare box revenue for February 2010 was 0.3% lower than the adopted budget for MTA bus, 3.4% lower for New York City Transit bus, and 6% worse for Long Island bus. Year-to-date, MTA bus fare box revenue is virtually equal to budget. Long Island bus is 1.1% below budget, and the Department of Bus New York City Transit is 2.4% below adopted budget levels. With regard to non-reimbursable expenses before non-cash adjustments, year-to-date 2010, MTA bus was better by $11.7 million than the adopted budget. This underrun is attributable to 2 primary factors: labor savings from vacant positions that we've targeted for expense reductions, as well as timing-related underruns in these non-personnel-related expense areas. Similarly, Long Island bus, in terms of actual non-reimbursable expenses year-to-date through February, was $1.8 million better than the adopted budget. This underrun was largely attributable to timing-related underruns, again in non-labor expenses, but also lower rates for CNG fuel than we had budgeted. As information for New York City Transit Bus, non-reimbursable expenses were $4.3 million better than budget year-to-date through February. I'd like to point out that the Department of Bus financial data is fully consolidated within Transit's financial statements for both revenues and expenses. Two other points. The bus parts recycling program continues to yield some very positive benefits to the three bus agencies. For the calendar year 2010 through April 22nd, over $4 million worth of bus parts were turned into inventory for installation on other buses in the fleet. And finally, as information for the committee, I would just like to briefly emphasize the actions.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. The actions we've taken in generating savings and containing costs since we began implementing.
I wanted to bring everybody's attention to this one thing.
Timing is everything. Since we implemented our unified management structure. Over the 2008 to 2010 budget cycles, we've achieved just about $100 million in annualized savings in the three bus areas, and this does not include the most recent service-related and administrative savings. This consists of $22 million in administrative staff reductions and consolidations, $33 million in bus-related and bus maintenance-related reductions and efficiencies, $32 million in fuel and facility maintenance savings, and another $12 million in transportation efficiencies in areas such as shifting, dispatching, and adherence to loading guidelines. And this concludes the financial report. On to procurements.
Okay. The procurement agenda this month includes 4 action items in the book totaling $5.422 million in expenditures. These 3 actions are for New York City Transit. One is for Long Island Bus. We'll be voting on the procurements by agency. Long Island Bus has 1 non-competitive procurement for $115,000. I ask your approval for this non-competitive Long Island Bus procurement in the agenda. New York City Transit Department of Buses 3 procurements totaling $5.3 million in expenditures. I ask for your approval for the 3 Department of Bus actions in the agenda.
I move them.
I'll move over to Norm Silverman with the service changes for MTA Bus.
Good morning.
We didn't vote on it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All in favor?
From reading this correctly, one of them is in relation to the bus lane enforcement system,
Right.
That's correct.
the camera
It's
issue.
a pilot, a test pilot for the bus lane enforcement initiative.
Right. And we can do that. We can put the camera on the bus. We can put the camera operating. We can see that people are violating, and we can't give them a ticket. That's how New York works, I guess, in that regard. Can we put their names on the post or something like that?
I guess we have to see, does the technology work? Can we make it work on a bus?
Right.
We have to make sure it's capturing the information we want it to capture in terms of license plates, things like that.
Regardless of
Okay.
whether or not at this point the legislature gives us the ability to ticket or not, I actually think this is a good thing to start moving it forward, just to show
absolutely.
people that it works.
Yeah.
A lot of times when people question what's going on, they want to know, well, what are you capturing? What are you not capturing? There's privacy, what the technology is. If we can show that this can actually work, it's not really an expensive item.
Right.
I think it makes even a stronger case to convince the legislature to give us, and the MTA and the city, the authority to enforce it. I think it's a good thing to do.
I would agree 100%. That's why I raise it, because it's, we've talked about it for a long time. We just should do whatever it is we can do and leave the legislature to the legislature. If we can at least do this, we should do this in that regard. So, thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. We have 1 MTA bus service adjustment to report as an information item for April. We're planning to revise the travel path of the Q60 local bus in Jamaica, Queens. The current path requires buses to divert off a direct path that's on commercial streets to use a residential street. To provide more efficient, direct, and faster travel path, we will streamline the path of the Q60 to remain on Jamaica Avenue to access Sutphin Boulevard instead of using 139th Street and Archer Avenue. This revision in the heart of the Jamaica Central Business District would remove service at 2 lightly used bus stops in each direction with alternative locations on the revised travel path. We believe the route change will help attract additional customers and expect the service change to actually reduce costs by $60,000 annually. We plan to implement this revision in late June 2010.
Norm, do you know why the bus was ever on 139th Street?
You'd have to ask the godfathers of green bus. I don't know.
It must have been a green bus issue at the time, I
It
think.
probably was a franchise issue, Andrew. And frankly, that street, not only is it off a commercial area, but whenever there's a heavy rain, we have to pull the bus off because it gets flooded. Lastly, Joe asked me to talk a little bit about the bus substitutions we've been employing for commuter rail service. In support of planned capital work on the commuter railroads, the consolidated bus operations have been providing shuttle support to Metro North and LIR under a series of MOUs. Recently, we performed several for Long Island Railroad in March and April as follows. We ran shuttles on 2 weekends to support closure of the Long Beach branch between Valley Stream and Long Beach on March 20th, 21st, and March 27th and 28th. For the first time, an integrated Long Island bus, MTA bus shuttle was run on 2 weekdays to support the midday closure of the Port Jefferson branch between Huntington and Port Jefferson on March 31st and April 1st. 2 weekends, we supported the complete closure of the Hempstead branch between Jamaica and Hempstead on April 10th and 11th and 17th and 18th. We supported 2 weekday closures to support the midday closure of the Montauk branch between Speonk and Montauk, April 11th through 16th and April 19th through 23rd. That was joint with MTA Bus. And the last was this past weekend entirely with LI Bus to support the closure of the Montauk branch between Babylon and Speonk. That ends my report.
This is being asked with tongue-in-cheek. Are you going to support the closure of the West Hempstead branch on weekends?
That's not a GO. That's a permanent service change.
How
Okay.
are you
Good
able
question.
to do that from time to time? Just round up troops to support a railroad closing? How can you mobilize people like that? How do you do it?
Well, on the weekends, we do it on an overtime basis. These jobs are bid as overtime, and they're worked that way, and we have an MOU with the railroad that covers those costs. During the weekday, it's a little tighter. It's the same idea. If we have extra operators, we offer it as overtime, and that's why on the weekends we have a combined operation between MTA Bus and Long Island Bus for the Long Island
Just for
operation.
example, on Friday, someone was hit by a train, I think it was in Hicksville, John, was it?
Wyandanch.
Wyandanch. And we were able to reach out and grab people from all the bus operations in Queens and every place we can because it's an emergency. There's people sitting on trains, and we got 21 buses out there within 40 minutes, which is great. And
Amazing. That's good overtime, right?
Yeah, it's good overtime. We think so. It's necessary to keep the service running, yes.
Okay, this month's materials include a final review of the MTA Bus and Long Island Bus 2009 actual results against the final estimate and modified 2010 adopted budget for the committee's information. The Department of Buses review is contained within the consolidated New York City Transit financial data. And also this month, all of the operating agencies will be presenting a brief update on the key changes to the 2010-2014 capital program. As you may be aware, Long Island Bus is not part of the MTA capital program and will not be addressed in this update. With regard to the revised capital plan, I'd like to ask Fred Smith, Acting Senior Vice President of the CPM for New York City Transit, to provide the update for both MTA Bus and the Department of Buses.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. And Joe reminded me to please be brief. Okay. It's on. Just to highlight for everybody, the board is going to be asked to vote on the 10 to 14 program this week. And I wanted you to know that the staffs at MTA Bus, Transit, MTA have been working very closely over the last couple of months in preparation for this. It'll result with the MTA Bus program of no change. $325 million will remain. However, on the transit side, there will be a reduction of $1 billion from 13.8 to 12.8 in the total program. And that will affect buses to the extent of $307 million. The revision of the program is really driven by three factors. One, the reduced federal funding assumptions. We had anticipated growth in 2010, 2011, going into 2012, and now those estimates have been reduced to the tune of about 1.7, almost $1.8 billion. Second, the corporate direction to basically go back and reevaluate all of our projects. towards a more focused scope and looking to cut costs where possible. And third, since it's been about a year since we developed the 10 to 14 submission that you saw back in late August, we had to review the leftover projects from 05 and 09 and include those that needed to be moved into 10 to 14. And there were two bus projects, one a fare box component replacement and some property acquisition that now will be located in the 10 to 14 program. There will be, as you will hear, a complete presentation of this at the Finance Committee. Linda Kleinbaum, I believe, will be making a full presentation. We wanted you to be aware of those impacts to the bus committee. Some of the major projects that are still in force, the fact that we are still buying over 2,090 buses in the TA program and 285 buses in the MTA bus program, is a significant purchase of buses when you look at the history of the capital program over the last 25 years. The most significant, other than buses, would be the radio system, which will remain in the program, the replacement of the bus radio system. Are there any questions? Okay.
And that basically concludes our remarks today. I will tell you personally, I'm very happy that all the bus stuff is finally under one roof. It was difficult for me to go to this committee, that committee, and it's easier to look at, hey, so how do all three agencies put together in the same place, how do they do, how do they perform, how do you overall can rate them or judge them based on their overall performance? And it's great to have it in one spot, and we've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes in the last few years in getting one system for our maintenance, sort of, for all the agencies. And it doesn't cost the agencies anything when you're able to take something that works over here and move it to the other areas. It actually saves us a lot of money and improves our performance. As you can tell, the $100 million was, I think it's sort of, it's a secret that is really a job well done by all my people over here and the people in the audience that support us. So.
Well, what you're saying seems very obvious, that the buses committee should have been combined, but it took Jay Walder to really put this all together. And after going to the railroad meeting that Mitch and Jim are chairing, and then seeing the efficiencies and economies of scale with combining the bus companies, like when you say just even buying your parts, right, and your inventories, and it's, I know none of it all sounds like simple economics, but as I said a second ago, it took Chairman Jay Walder to really to spearhead all this and take the initiative and have the guts.
Are you expecting the city to pick up the whole deficit now?
Bring it on.
That's not a serious question.
Yeah. Okay, if there are no further comments, questions, anything, see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, a motion to adjourn? And a second? Okay. All in favor? Okay.